So I'm Indra Adnan, and Pat, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Pat Kane. Hi.
So we're the co-initiators of The Alternative, and you might immediately be thinking, oh, that's funny, that's another alternative. And in fact, it's true that we started our project 7 years ago, almost just the beginning of this month, actually, as a sister project, really, to 𝗣cie𝗹𝗶𝘁𝗶𝘃𝗶𝗹𝗶𝘀 party, The Alternative in Denmark. And now I'm also going to share some slides, I hope. Strangely. There you go. All right, can everybody see that all right? Okay, so just by way of a very broad introduction, we began The Alternative UK 7 years ago on the 1st of March. And what I want to just bring into the frame and re-emphasize is that Pat and I had both been working in the arena of politics in different ways over decades, in fact. And we got to the point where we really did think, as Violetta just mentioned, politics is broken, what's the alternative? But what drew us to The Alternative in Denmark wasn't just that it was an experimental political party, but it had at its core this idea of human development, you know, the idea that human beings themselves are ready for something new. And having watched 𝗪𝗪's work with the Chaos Pilots and other, you know, work in the cultural sector, having been a minister for culture as well, we knew that this was very core to a shift in politics, that it should really emphasize human capacity again. More than that, maybe, when we actually first met The Alternative in Denmark, the reason we were so drawn to that party and its members was the sheer energy. It had, you know, the force of attraction. And it was so very different from anything that we were experiencing in politics up to that point. So literally, you know, the idea that politics should be something that is full of joy and energy, and it's very compelling, and it's drawing young people, and it's being successful. This was really a power that we wanted to somehow share in. So Pat, maybe you'd like to.
Sure. Well, and also there was also another historical moment or moment of experience that triggered the formation of the Alternative UK, the Alternative Global, which was the murder of Joe Cox. And I think, you know, Indra, I think, was attending one of the great Danish political festivals when that happened in the run-up to the Brexit vote, so which then went to leave. So the whole role of the whole question of exploring new forms of power beyond official politics came to a dramatic head. There was clearly a failure of official political discourse and official political practice. Couldn't be more spectacular a failure and tragic and drastic a failure than the assassination of Joe Cox. So one of the very early emphases that we had, I'm an artist and writer, and as a soft power advocate and psychotherapist, is that we had to think about where the emotional need was in politics alongside the material need. I mean, simply, this is a tale that what they call feels over reals is a story of populism. It's a story of politics over the last 15, 20 years. And it's about time that it was addressed in its fullness, not just with numbers and statistics, as Violetta would say, but also with an understanding of human nature, human emotions. We need an emotional literacy so that we can have a proper politics.
So when we began to look outside of when we began to look at the statistics around political parties, as we were all part of a party politics, we discovered that, in fact, only 2% of people in the UK, and this is a pattern across Europe and America, only 2% of people are actively members of political parties. So that's a very important statistic, because then you have to ask the question, what are the 98% doing with their energies and their times and their desires for some sort of agency or power? So shifting our attention for a new politics away from the current political system and beginning to see that we need to resource it amongst the people, within communities, in the places where people gather, with the values that people are sharing with each other in their daily lives. That became the direction, the new direction, and the new resourcing of a political culture for the future. So again, core to, and we're going to rush through these slides quite a lot in order to, but which is why we're using images. And that's part of the message really, is that maybe it's more the images than the words that will really get across what it is that we're trying to achieve. So here we're talking about how our socioeconomic political system till now has really alienated human beings from themselves and turned us into numbers so that we can be better managed and we can become part of a system of economic growth, really leaving our human selves behind. How do we move on from that? And the goal, if you like, of a new politics that we began to formulate quite early is that we should be able to find a reconnection between the complex and emotional and spiritual world of the human being with the planet that we're living on. So to find this connection between the I and the world, we also had to find the vehicle, if you like, the we that can hold that space. So this I-we world axis for a new politics became the core, if you like, of a new possible political system. Pat, do you want to speak any more to these images?
No, not really. I think we can get to the next one quite quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and the question of the social question of what are the sort of forms of organization and community that can express a politics that fully explores full spectrum human nature is a really interesting question. And we've been exploring that, and we've been testing that and prototyping forms of that. We have an idea of citizens' action networks, or CANs, as containers for all those discussions about power and resources and meaning and purpose that evade and are beyond the party political framework, which is what meanings people are drawing from culture, their relationships, their thoughts about the planet, their thoughts about the universe. We've tried to invent new language for that, not institutes, but constitutes. We're very, very taken by the alternatives' desire to create, and in Denmark, the alternatives' desire to create platforms, parties as platforms that support people's creative enterprise, as much as dragoon them into becoming voting fodder for one election or one referendum. So, but it's in terms of the innovation that Violetta was talking about that is sorely lacking in official politics. I think part of that innovation can be looked at by, and we have been looking at it over these 7 years, by people coming up with new forms of collective organization, new forms of social containers for energies that are not expressed by official politics. Shall I speak to this, Indra?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very briefly. And we've tried to really address this practically. So, for example, if you want to express the full humanity of a community, it probably needs a media appropriate to that can reflect both their own local concerns, but also their planetary consciousnesses, the fact that they know they're on a planet, that there are forces across the planet, environmental, technological, that are coming right up to their doorstep. And so what is the media that can help people comprehend that? So we've been running something called the Daily Alternative, literally does what it says on the front. It provides a daily post of an alternative take on the world of news, on the world of opinion. So basically that has built up into an archive, which is almost like a kind of simulation of an alternative reality, but based in people's experiments that we've picked up, that we've heard of, that we've decided to profile. We have a very strong taxonomy on the blog, so that we actually are thinking quite self-consciously about the categories of reality that we want to capture, and that then will inspire action rather than create inaction or passivity or despair. So making your own media is one of the practical ways that we've thought that we could do a new politics, and that we've been encouraging people to build media capacity in communities, partly by experiment, but partly by showing by example, as this page illustrates.
Mm. And I would say perhaps less simply news or opinion, and more, from the front lines of I, we, and world.
Yes.
So we do regularly report innovation in the world of self-development. We're reporting from the ground about community agency networks. And then we're always trying our best to link that to new news and understanding, not simply of the planet, but of what we call cosmolocalism, how human beings are able to connect with each other at a planetary level. So all this while, we're weaving, if you like, a new story about the possibilities for our future, arising directly from the innovation that's taking place on the ground around the world.
Yeah.
So one of the global phenomena, one of the things that we noticed over this 7-year period, we began to notice it very early on, is that there's a pattern. There's been a pattern arising for many decades of communities of all different sizes moving into relationship with themselves, crossing the traditional divides that have been offered to them or forced upon them, let's say, from the national level. And people who are living together in a place, wanting to come together to meet each other, sometimes to bring social entrepreneurship, sometimes to begin to solve local problems, but this desire for people to come together in the place where they live and begin to reflect and address the multiple crises that we're reading about. Now, in some cases, it's a very low-level connection. It's it's mainly just conversation, people making relationship, creating some kind of convivial spaces. But others are very, very ambitious. And you'll recognize some of these, the Transition Towns Network that wanted to be, towns full of people practicing permaculture and wanted to signal to the rest of the country we're the forerunners of a green future. Some of them are eco-villages. I think, Violetta, you know a lot about the eco-villages. Again, they're modeling new forms of community, new ways of living together. We found a lot of these in South Africa, particularly during COVID. They were forming very quickly. And across the different parts of South Africa, the more privileged, the less privileged, there was a very good connectivity with people helping each other out. So this idea, and of course, Cooperation Jackson is a cooperative of which there are, as Uffe described, hundreds of thousands across the world. This pattern of people coming together, forming kind of circular communities, trying to respond through in nature. We think of this as a kind of fractal organizing, because they have a lot in common with each other. It's not that they've instructed each other. There's no top-down authority saying there's only one way to do this and you have to do it this way. These have sprung up fairly spontaneously in relationship to each other, and because of the internet are now able to connect and sense their commonality. So in 2022, having blogged like this for 5 years by then, we got the sense that there was so much activity going on globally that was still quite disconnected. Not that many people, people don't necessarily know about each other's enterprises and innovations. So we wanted to offer some idea, just an image, if you like, that there was somewhere to go with all of that. And we named this idea Planet A, and we said it's open to all. Pat, maybe you'd like to speak a bit to what we call Planet A.
Well, I think Planet A is an example of eco-civilizational politics, because what it says is it deals with the frame in which you're in, and to actually frame living on this planet as your urgent political task is something that we need to shift towards. And I think the imperatives of eco-civilization compel us to be planetary citizens. But how do we practically do that? How do we break that ambition down into specific spheres of action? And so there we have, you might be able to see on the screen, we have the alternative media system, which I was just talking about. iPlanetarian, I guess this is what we're doing right now, is talking about a planetary eco-politic, a cosmo-local politics. But new energy sources is an interesting category for you to conjure with. And again, that comes back to our 2%, 98% critique of existing politics. What are the resources for energy that are cultural, consciousness, spiritual, psychological, artistic, practical, craft-oriented? I mean, there's a whole, not just a 7/8, but a 2%, 98% iceberg under the water of ways in which we can be, inspired to escape from a passivity that the corporate system wants us to have in relation to acting powerfully in our own lives. So why not live on that? Let's make a choice to live on that planet. I think it's kind of also evoking game culture and virtuality, or the kind of culture of virtuality that we have, and maybe saying we don't really need a headset to get there. We can actually do that from an act of mental imagination.
Yeah, in a sense, you elect yourself to live on Planet A.
Yeah.
And in so doing, you're saying no to Elon Musk. There's no need to move to Mars. So we worked, an interesting, 𝗘𝗃 is here because we worked together with 𝗘𝗃's European organization LIFT for some time to develop the idea of Planet A. And it became a very broad concept for us, but still we found with our, we had 700 co-creators who wanted to have some direct purchase on how to be involved directly with the movement of that we were pointing at, which we were calling the alternative. And so on March the 1st, 2023, we did another little shift in the way that we organized ourselves by naming what we call 4 incubators. And these are really, if you like, 4 takes on the new reality that we are trying to conjure up. And then, therefore, they offer 4 entry points into standing on Planet A. Some of you will recognize this as sort of a 4-quadrant approach of the relationship between individuals and the environment. But just to quickly, just to briefly describe, one of these entries is what we've been describing already in this presentation, is the school of learning, if you like. How does the individual become fit for the future? So the people who want to think about that particularly, maybe initiate projects and that join this future being incubator. The second one here is, refers to how do the community agency networks globally, how do they practically lead to an eco-civilization? So you could see that in 2023, we started to imagine that a real goal for all of the work that we're doing could be described as an eco-civilization. It's a term that we heard almost in the ether to start with. And then more practically, we heard it from individuals, not least Violetta herself, and then Jeremy Lent, who you're going to hear from next. It becomes a term that somehow is the largest possible vision for a future that we could all buy into as human beings. At the same time, we knew that we needed a new media system. And then finally, we also know that we need a new political system, not a new political party, a new way of being political. So that led then to what happened this year on March the 1st, 2024, the birth of a new political system. Perhaps you'd like to, and I know that we're running a bit short of time, so we're going to whip through these next few slides to try to help you to see what this new proposition is, and there's plenty of information on it on our website as well.
Yeah, very, very quickly, Spring is a political project which is beginning in Scotland. We'll move to Edinburgh. Scotland has a proportional system, unlike Westminster, which is a first past the post system. So there's a possibility of answering the question, politics is broken, what's the alternative, under a different political set of possibilities. And we're not about creating a party, but we're not open to it either. But the point is to have a kind of cultural and social force that drives you to that position. So some of the things, again, in the context of eco-civilization, we're all stumbling around, but we're trying to figure out what the core offers and the core values of such an eco-civilizational politics would be. Natality is a beautiful term. It's the opposite of mortality. It's probably another opposite of fatality. It comes from Hannah Arendt. And Bob Dylan also, he not busy being born is busy dying. But the idea that we should be encouraging a vital politics, a life energy politics, and we should be thinking about forms of deliberation and discussion that enable and help, that are complex rather than simplistic and polarized. So we have various things that we've been exploring. One thing you might want to go and look up is the idea of the anti-debate, which is our friends 𝗘𝗶𝗁𝗂 are bolting together. But the whole idea is that if we should try to have a politics that is emotionally literate, that is participative and collaborative, and to some extent in bringing people together to think about themselves, their immediate environments, the planet, and the future, prefigures the eco-civilization. There's an awful lot of possibility for that inventiveness to be happening, but you kind of have to win the heart battle first to get people to be motivated to do it. But through new inputs and radical and novel inputs, we think that could be done. And I think that's probably the next slide, Indra. Well, yeah, and one of them is to think differently about the economy. We are showered with ideas for new economic practice, for critiques of the existing neoliberal model. We have stuff that's coming in from heterodox economists, stuff that's coming in from games culture, stuff that's coming in from crypto. We're in a sort of from modern monetary theory or ecological economics. We're in a kind of an embarrassment of riches of alternatives to the existing economic model. One of the things we would like to do with Spring as a political project of eco-civilization is to bring that alternative economic literacy to communities and to give them a sense that these systems of value can value other things rather than just purely monetary value. The technology is there, the ideas are there, the philosophy is there, and we should find spaces in our lives to experiment that and try out new ideas of economic practice. I mean, particularly given technology on one side and planetary limits on the other, is going to really rip up the existing economic settlement. So we owe it to ourselves to survive our own future, to begin to experiment with different kinds of economy under the idea of Spring.
And I think what maybe the image should just keep reminding us of all the time is that it's really through community and relationship that this new economy will arise, that this is not something that we're waiting to come from outside. It's not something that we're waiting to be given to us in a way by the current system. It's something that is arising organically from within communities, sometimes through bringing their own currencies, but developing new forms of capital that this is something that is arising from the human beings that are coming back to life. Just quickly, Spring then is also a communication system. I think Pat already described a little bit earlier on how important it is for us to be able to offer something alternative to people when they're looking for hope and they're looking for some new solution to the problem. That we're being systemic about that and systematic about it, drawing information from the community agency networks around the world, giving them interconnectivity with each other, but also doing the job of translating that, telling a new story to people who are not even interested in this question, people who are not political, people who are, in a sense, distrustful of newness. Still, we find that there are points of attraction that we can generate from a new kind of media system. And then finally, the thing I suppose that we started with, what is in fact the new political system that we're offering? And I hope that it's become clear that all of this energy that we're describing is coming from the 98%. It's an era of self-organization that has been slowly building since over the 30 years that we've had the internet. And what we believe is taking shape and what we are encouraging to take shape is a kind of a parallel polis, a way for people to self-organize, not in a way to want to overthrow the government, but eventually to be in a good partnership with the current system so that there can be, in a way, a hard power, soft power, partnership towards a better future. At this moment, we don't have anything like this except a few sporadic citizens' assemblies, people's assemblies, very disconnected and still being run by the old political system. But what we're seeing right now, especially with the advent of new technology, is the possibility of all the community agency networks that we've seen moving into relationship with each other and beginning to develop some sort of self-governance that helps them to take decisions about their future that will influence the current system, but also support all the efforts of the people within that emergence. So that is, if you see the two legs up there, it's two legs, one body. The one on the right is really trying to describe what we see emerging now amongst people. That can be hugely enhanced over the next 5 years are going to be very crucial for that.
Okay, we've been told we have to cut down and get out of here. So just to let you know that all of this political innovation may land itself in Scotland and hopefully the rest of the UK and all the rest of Europe. But we're here in Edinburgh to start the process. Next slide, Indra. So yes, let's see what organically grows. It might not require political representation. It might be the obvious thing, but for all these arguments to have the political representative voice is a possibility. We are open to it. It may happen, and that might be an ironic outcome of politics is broken. What's the alternative 7 years ago? But it might well be that we're in a situation where we can have a voice for eco-civilization in a national parliament. That would be nice. It's not necessary, but it would be nice. So I think that's us.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all very much.